cropping up stockers. Zack, the stock cropper, Friday, May 16th, coming to you from the confines of the couch, which means two things. Number one, we're done with planting. Number two, we did finally get a little bit of rain. So after a long 2 weeks, I said screw it and took the afternoon off. And after doing some stuff in the wind this morning, we're in really good shape here in northern Iowa. All of our beans are up. They had to fight through some crust, but for the most part, they're okay. That we planted a month ago. Our corn, we started planting on May 4th and finished planting the last of the stock cropper plots here just this past Wednesday. And probably 75% of our corn's already out of the ground and looking really good with all the heat and good conditions that we planted into. We were patient with that, and it looks like that paid off. And really excited about the stock cropper plots that we got put in. That went in very, very well. I was kind of nervous about how that was going to go and the complications. That's what this video was going to be about this week, but I changed it up after the 2025 Dust Bowl hit the upper Midwest. And I thought it was more important with the relevance of that from a time value to discuss that here instead. And you know, I'm oftentimes I probably am too much of a snarky dick with my commentary. It's just my nature, unfortunately. I'm going to try to talk about this stuff with less of that in mind, because I think, you know, that comes from a point of frustration, I think, that myself, along with a lot of other folks that have seen the benefits of some of these alternative practices that are used on a very small part of the landscape. We see how effective they are in stopping days like yesterday, or I shouldn't say stopping, minimizing. That's a better word, minimizing days like yesterday. And it's frustrating for folks in you know, our community to see that there are solutions, and yet the majority still, you know, is using alternative methods that add to the problem. And so I want to make a video that's as respectful as possible so that people will actually watch it and not just turn it off, but still get to the heart of some of these issues and have some kind of straight and direct talk that I try to put out here. So with that, let's go deep. So just a little bit of context, you know, we had the last 2 days here in northern Iowa, we've had anywhere from sustained winds of 30 to probably, you know, mid 50s. Or gusts, I should say, of that high, 50 to 60 miles an hour. And, you know, we had a situation where there was a lot of dirt in the air. And, you know, why is that? Why does that happen this time of the year? Well, it happens for a couple of reasons. You know, most of the landscape is managed in a way where there's very little residue. So there's very little soil armor left to take the impact of the saltation of soil particles that start to erode. So it really becomes like rolling a snowball down the hill. If you have a lot of soil that doesn't have cover on top, or if it lacks aggregate stability that's been destroyed by secondary tillage passes, which we do in the spring with a lot of field cultivating, or in some cases high-speed disking, or finishing things off with smooth rollers, which are, you know, designed to compress and basically get the airspace out, and kind of makes it really nice for combining, no doubt, but has impacts that really make it vulnerable for both wind and water erosion. And so, you know, this is not an uncommon thing. It's become very common, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, as the intensity of spring tillage, I would say, is quite a bit more than what it used to be. I was having a conversation with somebody and said, you know, do you remember this being like this back in high school? And he's like, no, I don't. And when you think, well, why is that? Well, we didn't have these unbelievable tillage tools that we have today that are so intense. You know, we had people running around with Glencoe soil savers and Earthmasters and Tebbins, you know, and it left the ground surface rough. And even after you field cultivated it with a field cultivator from the 80s or the 90s, they weren't perfectly smooth. They didn't have rolling baskets on them to finish everything off to make it into complete moon dust. And so, you know, from my recollection, And we didn't have land rollers. Land rollers have only been around for, maybe 15 to 18 years, if I could remember that timing right, when that got kind of introduced here. And so it's the combination of kind of the evolution of the intensity of tillage, both primary in the fall, followed with intense secondary tillage in the spring to make the seed bed ready, is why we have this environment. And when we have that set of circumstances in conjunction with 2 or 3 days of wind, this is what it looks like. So here's some of the examples of what we saw here. This is some video this morning of a farm not just a couple miles west that was really blowing off bad with about 40-mile-an-hour winds, especially in that bottom ground that you can see there. That was some peat that was just absolutely exploding up into the air. The next video here is one from a buddy up in near New Richland, Minnesota, where you see something similar, a big plume going right over top of the road, which can be a dangerous situation. In fact, it actually almost was deadly yesterday. I've got another picture coming up soon to talk about that. This is a picture from actually earlier this spring in some of the early spring winds, where you see the erosion that was put into people's yards near some organic production. This is a shot from somebody in the news media showing just how much was coming over the road. You can see the pieces of residue there flying intensely over. It's got to be probably 50-mile-an-hour winds. This is a picture of what it looked like for people on I-35. And this is a picture of what I was talking about, the accident site where 2 people hit head-on in Humboldt County, Iowa yesterday as a result of brownout conditions, not being able to see each other. So what's the big deal? Why should we care? Doesn't the wind blow every year? And it can't be that much soil that we're losing. It's not like we see feet gone afterwards. I mean, those are some of the common retorts. But what are we losing? Well, we are losing soil. And are we losing feet at a time? No, we're losing small little fractions. But it's the richest fractions of soil that we have, which come from the topsoil. It's not like we're losing subsoil that somehow gets unearthed underneath it. It's the best stuff that has the most fertility value, the most nutrients. And once it gets up in the air and it gets suspended in the atmosphere, it can go for hundreds, if not thousands of miles, depending on the strength of the storm system, and just be gone forever. A lot of folks will say, well, it'll just fall back out on somebody else's field, and it's all kind of the same. That just isn't how it works, unfortunately. So not only are we losing the wealth of having small fractions of our topsoil disappear every year, which adds up cumulatively over time, we're also losing some of the things that go with it. And the notorious Lance Peterson put out a tweet yesterday about how many tens and hundreds of thousands, millions of acres of soils had a pre-emerge herbicide applied to that top surface layer, waiting for a rain to incorporate it, including myself. I was in that camp where I had herbicide waiting for rain, which we didn't get. And then we had that wind action come and loft that up. And now you have the loss of, potential loss of weed control from not having your active ingredient there to actually inhibit weeds. But what's worse is, where in the hell did that end up? Where did it go? And are we responsible for that to a certain extent? Now, the farmer can't determine, every time you put a herbicide out for weed control, you're waiting for a rain to really incorporate that. You are at, the beck and call of Mother Nature. It is possible to incorporate it, but there's other consequences to that, with moisture loss from the seed bed, things of that nature, blah, 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 blah. But there are options. But, the biggest issue is when everything is tilled so finely, everything is vulnerable to make everything move. And so we can have a mass migration of topsoil that has not only herbicides on it, but, UAN, nitrogen, liquid nitrogen that's attached to those soil particles, and it's moving and it's gone. And so not only is it a loss potentially to the farmer from weed control, fertility, things of that nature, but also a loss to the environment, with having to deal with the unintended placement of that stuff just going poof up into the air. So none of those things are good, and all participants in the system should be concerned about that. So the next question is, why don't farmers proactively do something about this if there's solutions to this issue? Is it because they're bad people? Well, no, they're not. They're just following the confines and the guidelines. So they do the practices. Let me be very clear. They do the practices that they do that increase the loss in specifically to wind and water erosion, because they make farming easier and faster. And those are the most important things in the farming equation. Is we don't have a system that's set up to farm well. We have a system that is set up to farm fast. How do we enable farm operations that allow us to go very, very fast? And in order to be able to plant at 10 miles an hour, you need a perfectly smooth seed bed. And if you need a perfectly smooth seed bed, it means you need to have a lot of intense tillage in the fall and get that relatively level, and then hit that with an intense tillage tool that takes all the lumps and the clumps and turns it into moon dust powder, so that you can take a high-speed planter across that at 10 miles an hour. And if you want to combine that fall, specifically on a crop like soybeans, where you have to have the platform close to the ground to get a shave, to get every bushel off that you can from the field, that needs to be tabletop smooth. And so you've got to get all the root balls and the rocks that you've stirred up with tillage and push them back down, so that you can cut maybe an extra hour or two into the day when it gets tough at the end of the day and the bean head starts to push. The roller fixes that. So like, all of these things don't make our soils better. They don't make our environment better, but they make farming faster, and they allow the rules of the game dictate going fast and large. It's not, the quality of the acres you're getting across. You get paid basically on the quantity of the acres that you're getting across. And the practices that lead to days like yesterday are geared toward helping farmers get across more acres in a day. That is just a hard fact. And the practices that would mitigate those issues are not as fast. And that's the reason that they're not widely adapted, because there is no reward to care about any type of external cost or farm in a way that minimizes environmental losses, or even personal losses of soil. And that's essentially the mindset that we have in agriculture. Is we don't farm for the long term. We operate the landscape more like a strip mine, with the goal of not farming for 100 years, but let's just farm for the 9 months so that we can pay the note back to the bank and hope to see next year. So what's going to change things? Honestly, I think, I was having a good conversation with my good friend Matt Borman down by Algona, Iowa, about this afternoon, and he put a video out on his Snapchat and said, basically, I think there's going to have to be some sort of, more tragic deaths that occur, more accidents where people actually die, where the general public is going to stand up and say, hold on a second, wait, and this is kind of nuts. Like, why are we allowing to do this? And we'll probably have some sort of regulation to come in to, perhaps hold farmers liable. That was talked about with the crash that happened a couple springs ago. I think it was 2 springs ago on I-55 in Illinois, where there was, I don't know, it was like 7 or 9 people killed, including a couple kids, and like 105-car pileup in a dust storm because of the intense tillage practices that were going on right next to the interstate, and in one of those situations where a dust storm came. When farmers start having to accept the liability of the external costs of those operations, maybe that starts to change the game. Maybe if your insurance premiums go up, or maybe there will just be, start to be legislation in states or localities about these things to change behavior. But farmers, I say it all the time, farmers follow the policy, and as long as the policy allows for this stuff, they're in business to make money. And just like a lot of businesses, they will go up to the line, whatever they can do to get that competitive advantage. And if there isn't anything to account for or say, hey, we value these things, you need to, farm or operate in a way to maintain them or to minimize threats to public safety or pollution or things like that, we're going to go to that line every time. That's not farmers, that's human nature. And so, as little as I want to have government intervention, because from the inefficiencies that a lot of times that has, unfortunately, if we're not going to clean up our own act, somebody's going to probably eventually clean it up for us. And it's too bad because, I utilize the practices on my own farm, on my own commodity grain operation of strip till and cover crops. They've helped substantially reduce both water and wind erosion. Are they perfect? No. I know I had stuff blowing off my fields yesterday. I'm not happy with some of the decisions I've made. I know personally I'm going to get rid of the stalk stompers on my combine because I don't have enough armor on my corn stalk fields for stalks standing up to catch the residue or perhaps knock some of that dirt out of the air that's trying to saltate across my ground. I want to have something to take that impact of that energy of those soil particles and not disperse it onto my soil or my strips where I planted. I want to have it hit the residue instead. And that's the point of soil armor. And then the other thing I'm going to do differently for next year is I'm going to go back to drilling my cover crops ahead of planting corn. I've been blowing them over the top the last couple of years. It pushes the establishment further close to freeze up, so I don't get very good establishment, and it takes longer for them to get going in the spring. And my soybean stubble doesn't have as much armor on it as I would like for situations like yesterday. So those are some of the things, even with my system, where a lot of people would I think have an attitude toward no-tillers or strip tillers. Well, you guys think you're holier than thou and you don't have anything to improve upon. Well, that's bullshit. Everybody has something they can improve upon. There's just varying degrees of it. And so my challenge to folks is if you look at that stuff yesterday, what can you improve upon? What's a meaningful step that you can take next year if that bugs you to see that much soil in the air, or you're embarrassed maybe a little bit by it, or you're looking at that and thinking down the line with the shrinking numbers of farmers on farms, what's the public going to do? It's pretty hard for when you've got all the ag influencers and you've got, the commodity group standing up and saying, farmers love the land. They are the stewards. Why would they treat the land in a way that would be, disadvantageous to their production? Well, we do it because there's no consequences, and the public will figure out a way to create consequences. And I would just assume that not happen. I would just assume we govern ourselves and we do things that are in our own best interest, that maximize the greatest resource on the face of the earth, which is the Midwest topsoil that we have here, and try to preserve that and try to farm in a way that maximizes production and minimizes impacts to other people. I just think that's the right thing to do. And the other thing I wanted to throw in here today, I got some comment from some cuck on Twitter that doesn't have a name saying, if we do these things, people are going to go hungry. Jesus Christ, come on, get real. I'm so tired of hearing this narrative from people that, we can't produce a lot of food and do it much better than what we're doing. There are farmers all over the Midwest and the world that are utilizing practices that maximize soil health and minimize days like yesterday. And they are not growing 130 bushel corn. In some cases, folks like David Hula are setting the effing corn production record. So stop with that nonsense and that fear mongering that, it is not possible to farm in a way that produces a lot and minimizing, the negative externalities. It is a fear-mongering, pussy-ass narrative, and I'm tired of hearing it. And that's about as foul as I'm going to get today. I think that's probably enough for today, but this is a topic I've wanted to about a long time. I've tried not to be a dick about it, and you know, again, my challenge is, what are you going to do? How are you going to be better at this? What is your next step? It doesn't have to be this colossal leap. You know, you don't have to go from, you know, doing 32 passes of tillage to being a no-tiller. I think that's probably a bad idea. You'll probably fail at that. But what are things that you can do? Maybe it's as simple as like talking to a neighbor, you know, that's maybe using some of these practices, and ask some questions. You know, that would be great. That would be better than what's happening now. So I hope if anything comes from that video, it's maybe that, or this video, it's maybe that. And that would be a success in my mind. So just, if it bugs you, do something about it. Don't just sit here and turn the page to 2026, because I guarantee you, if we just do that, I'll have to come back on here and make more of this bullshit again, and I really don't want to do that. So that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Get busy living.